The following video is an educational analysis of the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. It contains historical accounts, real-life examples, and interpretive commentary. Any resemblance between the stories told here and the lives of individuals today is coincidental. This content is not intended as personal advice, nor does it promote deception, harm, or unethical behavior. The purpose of this video is to explore ideas, strategies, and lessons from history, to examine how power has been gained, lost, and wielded across time. Viewers are encouraged to think critically, reflect independently, and apply these lessons with wisdom and responsibility.
The greatest victory is to defeat the enemy without fighting. Sun Tzu.
Think about the last time someone made you angry. Not just irritated, not just annoyed, but truly angry. The kind of anger that blinds you for a moment. Maybe it was someone close to you, a partner, a sibling, a so-called friend. Maybe it was a colleague who undermined you in front of others. Maybe it was an online stranger whose words cut deeper than they should have. Do you remember what happened inside your mind? Your thoughts stopped flowing in straight lines. Your chest tightened, your vision tunneled. You said something you didn't plan to say, or you acted in a way you later regretted. For that moment, you weren't in control. The emotion was. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. What if that moment wasn't an accident? What if it was the result of someone deliberately provoking you? What if they knew exactly how to stir you like a fisherman thrashing the water to bring hidden fish to the surface? We like to imagine we are rational beings guided by reason, immune to manipulation, but the reality is crueler. The more intelligent, the more ambitious, the more prideful you are, the easier it can be for someone to unsettle you, because the bait that catches the cleverest fish is never a simple worm. It is pride, it is envy, it is anger, and history is littered with examples of men and women undone not by their enemy's strength, but by their own inability to remain calm when provoked. Let me take you back to one of the most fateful days in history. The year is 331 BC. The air is thick with dust and anticipation. On the plains of Gaugamela, King Darius III of Persia waits with an army so massive it dwarfs anything the ancient world has ever seen. His soldiers stretch across the horizon. His war chariots lined with blades glint in the morning sun. By every measure of strength, Persia should crush its opponent. And yet across the battlefield, Alexander of Macedon waits. His army is smaller, his men outnumbered. But Alexander has something Darius does not: control of his own mind and the patience to let his enemy destroy himself. He provokes, he agitates, he creates small movements, subtle threats, diversions that make Darius nervous. The Persian king believes he must act first or lose his advantage. He pushes his army forward too soon, stretching his massive forces until they can no longer hold together. What was once an overwhelming wave becomes scattered ripples. Alexander strikes, and the great Persian king, ruler of the richest empire on earth, flees the battlefield. The Persians were not defeated by swords alone. They were defeated by panic, by haste, by their leader's inability to stay calm under provocation. If Darius had waited, if he had remained cold, steady, unshaken, history might tell a different story. But he thrashed in the waters and Alexander caught his fish. This is the law you're about to learn. When you are the one who stirs the waters, you control the storm. But when someone else stirs them and you lose your calm, you become the catch. Why does provocation hold such dangerous power over us? Why do even the most disciplined rulers, generals, and thinkers, men who could command armies and govern nations, lose everything in a single moment of rage? The answer begins in the body, long before strategy or reason. Anger is ancient. It is older than politics, older than civilization, older even than language. For our ancestors, hesitation meant death. The flash of rage, the surge of adrenaline, these were survival mechanisms. They pushed a man to strike when cornered, to shout when threatened, to fight for dominance in the tribe. In the wilderness, anger could mean the difference between being eaten and walking away alive. But what was once a tool of survival becomes a vulnerability in a world where battles are no longer fought with teeth and claws, but with words, alliances, contracts, and strategies. Anger blinds more than it protects. Rage confuses more than it clarifies. And in the arena of power, confusion is fatal. Modern neuroscience only confirms what the ancients already suspected. When you are provoked, when anger boils or envy bites, the rational part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, the seat of judgment and long-term calculation, begins to dim. The amygdala, that ancient knot of neurons deep in your skull, seizes control. In this state, you are not thinking clearly. You are reacting. You are not weighing consequences. You are seeking release. You want to strike, to lash out, to restore your pride at any cost. And in that moment, you are predictable. This predictability is the manipulator's feast. If they know your triggers, if they understand your pride, they can pull the strings of your behavior with the lightest tug. An insult whispered in your ear. A rumor planted where you will hear it. A slight staged in public so that you must defend your reputation. You think you are acting freely, but in truth you are following a script written by someone else. History is crowded with the corpses of men who followed that script. Think of generals lured out of fortified positions by taunts. Think of politicians baited into overreactions that destroyed their credibility. Think of kings who struck down their closest advisors in paranoia, only to weaken themselves beyond repair. The manipulator does not need to fight you directly. They need only stir your waters until you thrash blindly, and then they step aside, watching as you exhaust yourself. But this is not only the story of emperors and rulers, it is your story too. Reflect on your own life. Think of a time when someone knew exactly how to provoke you. A co-worker who hinted at your mistakes just loudly enough for others to hear. A friend who twisted a truth into an insult, daring you to defend yourself. A partner who withheld words of affection, knowing the silence would sting more than anger ever could. How often have you found yourself saying, "I lost my temper, I wasn't thinking"? That is the very phrase of the fish who has taken the bait. The truth is painful but necessary. You are not as rational as you believe. None of us are. And this is why provocation has such enduring power. It works on the proud because pride is easily bruised. It works on the ambitious because ambition is easily threatened. It works on the fearful because fear magnifies shadows into monsters. The manipulator thrives not on strength but on this fragility. Crowds are even easier prey. A mob does not think. A mob feels. One rumor, one spark, one whispered insult can turn a gathering into chaos. Entire nations have been thrown into disorder by a single clever provocation. Politicians, revolutionaries, even demagogues across history have relied on the same tactic. Stir the waters, create anger directed at an enemy, and then quietly harvest the power that follows. Anger spreads faster than reason. Envy burns hotter than truth. And once the waters are in motion, most people will never notice who cast the first stone. This is why Robert Greene warns us. If you can remain calm while others rage, you have already won. The calm man sees opportunities invisible to those blinded by fury. The calm man watches as enemies reveal their weaknesses, shouting too loudly, moving too quickly, making mistakes they would never make in silence. But if you lose your calm, if you are provoked into revealing too much, into reacting too soon, you hand your opponent the advantage. The law is merciless in its clarity. The person who stirs the waters holds the line. The one who thrashes in them is already caught. Look at the world around you. Online arguments spiral into threats and insults, destroying reputations that took years to build. Businesses collapse not because of market forces, but because leaders reacted to rumors instead of strategy. Families break apart because pride was wounded in a moment of anger, words spoken that could never be taken back. At every level of life, from the palace to the office to the dinner table, provocation reveals the same truth. When you are not calm, you are not free. This is the psychological foundation of Law 39. To provoke is to control. To resist provocation is to survive, and to master both. To stir others while remaining calm yourself is to hold power in its purest form. Centuries before Alexander the Great carved his name into history, there was another man, his father, Philip II of Macedonia. Philip was not born into overwhelming power. He inherited a fragile kingdom on the brink of collapse, surrounded by enemies who mocked Macedonia as a weak backwater. But Philip had a weapon rarer than soldiers or gold. He understood human nature. He understood that men could be defeated without battles, that kingdoms could crumble not from spears but from suspicion. His strategy was simple yet devastating. Stir the waters. Philip observed that alliances between his enemies were always fragile, bound not by love but by necessity. Neighboring Greek city-states distrusted one another almost as much as they distrusted Macedonia. Instead of attacking them head-on, Philip whispered. He spread rumors, funded rival factions, bribed officials, and planted doubts. He would flatter one city while quietly sending envoys to another, each carrying a slightly different message. He let envy do the work. A diplomat of Athens might hear that Thebes was planning to betray them. A Spartan commander might be told that Athens had accepted Philip's gold. None of these rumors needed to be entirely true. They needed only to stir the waters enough to cloud judgment. Soon his enemies stopped looking outward at Macedonia and started looking inward, suspicious of one another. When Philip did march his armies, he often faced not a united coalition but fractured, distrustful forces. City-states unwilling to fully trust one another on the battlefield. While his enemies argued, Philip acted. While they debated, Philip conquered. Consider the famous example of the Sacred War, a conflict in Greece that dragged on for years. Philip did not rush to involve himself. Instead, he watched as Athens, Thebes, and other city-states exhausted themselves in anger and mistrust. When the time was right, Philip stepped in as the savior of order. And by then his enemies were too weakened by their own agitation to resist. The fish had thrashed themselves into his net. Notice the genius here. Philip did not always need to defeat his enemies with overwhelming force. Instead, he let them defeat themselves. By stirring rivalries, feeding suspicion, and planting rumors, he created storms that consumed those who could not remain calm. And the lesson is as clear today as it was then. Think of the workplace. One whispered comment about favoritism can fracture a team more effectively than 1,000 meetings. Think of politics. A well-timed leak can create chaos in an opponent's camp, forcing them into frantic, ill-advised moves. Think of personal life. Sowing doubt in a rival's relationship may cause them to lash out at their partner, weakening them without you ever lifting a hand. Philip's power came not from brute strength, but from patience. He knew the waters of human pride and envy are always unsettled. All he had to do was stir them slightly and then step back while others lost themselves. Robert Greene writes of Law 39 that the calm strategist gains power not by force but by foresight. Philip was the living embodiment of this. He was not always the strongest on the battlefield, but he was almost always the calmest in the storm. And that calm let him rule Greece, laying the foundation for his son Alexander to build an empire that stretched to the edges of the known world. Centuries after Philip II manipulated Greek city-states into destroying one another, another man would rise who understood the same principle on an even grander scale. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte. To his enemies, he was a monster. To his followers, a savior. But to anyone studying the nature of power, Napoleon was a master of provocation. On the battlefield, Napoleon's genius was not only in his tactics, but in his ability to unbalance his opponents before swords even clashed. He understood that men, no matter how disciplined, were ruled by their nerves. If he could stir those nerves into fear, uncertainty, or anger, he could win battles before they began. One of Napoleon's most effective strategies was deliberate confusion. He moved his armies with such speed that opponents rarely knew where he was or how large his forces truly were. He spread false information through captured messengers, planted rumors in neutral cities, and allowed enemy scouts to glimpse exactly what he wanted them to see. It was provocation at scale. Entire armies stirred into panic by shadows. Consider the campaign of Austerlitz in 1805, often called his greatest victory. Facing a coalition of Russian and Austrian forces, Napoleon knew he was outnumbered. By traditional calculation, he should have been defeated. But instead of matching their strength with his own, he provoked them. He feigned weakness, retreating deliberately, letting the Allies believe they had forced him onto the defensive. He abandoned high ground, making his position appear vulnerable. Every move was designed to stir his enemies' confidence, to lure them forward with the scent of easy victory. The coalition commanders, eager to crush him, took the bait. They moved rashly, splitting their armies in an attempt to exploit what they thought was Napoleon's weakness. But the moment they stretched themselves thin, Napoleon struck. His troops, waiting calmly for the signal, surged into the fractured lines, cutting them apart piece by piece. By the end of the day, the weak French army had annihilated its opponents, leaving thousands dead and Europe stunned. The brilliance of Austerlitz was not simply in clever troop movements, it was in Napoleon's psychological mastery. He stirred his enemies' waters with feints, rumors, and appearances until they saw what he wanted them to see. Their overconfidence blinded them. Their eagerness became their downfall. And this pattern repeated itself throughout his career. At Ulm, in 1805, he encircled an Austrian army without a major battle, simply by maneuvering so quickly and unpredictably that the enemy commanders panicked into surrender. At Jena, in 1806, he provoked the Prussians into attacking prematurely, exploiting their rigid pride. Even at Waterloo, though he ultimately lost, his instinct was the same. Keep the enemy off balance, keep them stirred, make them thrash until they reveal an opening. Napoleon understood that the mind of a general is no different than the mind of an ordinary man. Both are vulnerable to pride, anger, and fear. The difference is that when a general loses his calm, tens of thousands of soldiers die. Robert Greene's law echoes in Napoleon's life. Never meet your enemy on calm waters. Always stir them first. Confusion and anger are weapons sharper than any sword. And for the viewer, the lesson is clear. You may not command armies, but you face your own battles. Negotiations at work, conflicts in relationships, arguments that matter to your future. If you enter these battles calm while others are stirred, you already hold the higher ground. And if you can stir them, make them reveal themselves, push them into rash words or premature moves, then victory is often yours before the real contest even begins. This is the timeless gift of provocation. It makes others predictable. And once they are predictable, they are already defeated. If Napoleon used provocation to unbalance armies, Joseph Stalin used it to unbalance entire nations. His mastery of Law 39 was not in open warfare, but in psychological control, paranoia, and fear. Stalin understood that chaos is not only a battlefield tactic, it is a method of government. When Stalin rose to power after Lenin's death, he did not yet command the unquestioned loyalty of the Soviet Union. Rivals like Leon Trotsky, Lev Kamenev, and Grigory Zinoviev circled him like sharks, each believing they could seize control. In a straightforward contest of ideas, Stalin might have lost. Trotsky was the better orator, the sharper intellect, the natural heir in many eyes. But Stalin was not playing a straightforward game. He played the game of provocation. He stirred the waters of the Communist Party until no one could see clearly. His method was insidious. He spread rumors, planted doubts, and let suspicion grow unchecked. One day he would praise Trotsky in public while privately whispering that Trotsky planned to betray the revolution. The next he would flatter Kamenev while hinting that Zinoviev was plotting against him. None of his allies ever knew where they stood because Stalin made sure they were always slightly off balance. The effect was devastating. Rivals turned on one another, each desperate to prove loyalty to Stalin, each blinded by the storms of paranoia he created. In time, they destroyed one another, and Stalin remained, calm in the chaos he had manufactured. But he did not stop there. Once he consolidated power, Stalin extended provocation into the very fabric of Soviet life. The purges of the 1930s were not merely about eliminating enemies. They were about keeping the entire population unsettled. At any moment, a loyal party member could be accused of treason. At any moment, a general could be denounced, a factory manager arrested, a neighbor vanished. This uncertainty was deliberate. Stalin knew that when waters are calm, men can think. They can plan. They can resist. But when waters are stirred, when fear ripples through every home, when no one knows who will be accused next, men cannot think. They cannot organize. They thrash blindly, desperate to survive, suspicious even of their closest friends. The brilliance and horror of Stalin's provocation was that it required little direct action. Often he did not need to give explicit orders. A hint, a suggestion, a subtle stirring of rumor was enough to set entire ministries tearing themselves apart in suspicion. Officials denounced one another, terrified of being denounced first. In this climate, Stalin remained untouchable. He was the only one who appeared calm, the only one who seemed in control. And in a world of chaos, calmness looks like divinity. This is the darkest application of Law 39, not merely winning battles but reshaping reality. By stirring waters constantly, Stalin made sure there was no firm ground for anyone else to stand on. And because no one else could think clearly, no one else could challenge him. The lesson here is sobering. Provocation is not always a passing tactic. It can be a permanent strategy. A manipulator who constantly stirs waters ensures that no rival ever finds clarity, no enemy ever finds footing. In such storms, only the one who stirred them can see a path forward. But let there be no mistake. There is a cost to such power. Stalin's reign left millions dead, a nation traumatized, and his own legacy soaked in blood. To provoke endlessly is to live in endless fear yourself, for the storms you create eventually consume even their master. Still, for decades, Stalin proved what Philip and Napoleon already knew. Clarity belongs to the calm. Chaos belongs to the manipulator. The man who can stir others while remaining still himself holds an unnatural power. We like to believe that provocation belongs to the past, a weapon of kings, generals, and dictators. But look closely at the world around you, and you will see Law 39 alive everywhere. The battlefield has simply changed. The weapons are no longer swords or chariots, but words, images, and information. The waters stirred today are not rivers or seas, but the collective mind of society itself. Consider politics. In every nation, leaders and parties know that calm voters are difficult to control. Calm citizens weigh policies, consider evidence, and demand accountability. But angry voters, envious voters, fearful voters, they are easy to guide. All it takes is a well-timed rumor, a carefully chosen phrase, a headline designed not to inform but to enrage. Suddenly, crowds are not thinking. They are reacting. They are thrashing. And in that thrashing, the manipulator casts his net. This is why outrage dominates political campaigns. It is why leaders prefer stirring the waters with scandal rather than answering with reason. Because when people are stirred, they stop asking careful questions. They want quick answers, enemies to blame, simple stories. And those who offer these stories seize power. The same principle governs modern media. News outlets, social platforms, and influencers thrive not on calm discussion but on storms. Outrage sells. Fear spreads. Anger goes viral. Every day you see headlines designed not to inform but to provoke. A celebrity insult taken out of context, a conflict exaggerated, a mistake amplified. The calmer you are, the less time you spend on the platform. The angrier you are, the longer you scroll, the more you click, the more profit is made from your agitation. In this sense, provocation has become industrialized. Entire companies now specialize in stirring waters because chaos is profitable. Every algorithm is tuned to feed you what will provoke you most, what will anger you, shock you, disgust you. And while you thrash in those stirred waters, your attention, your time, and even your beliefs are quietly harvested. But do not think this is only about politics and media. Law 39 lives in your everyday life as well. In the office, a colleague may provoke you with a comment in front of the boss, knowing that if you lose your temper, you lose credibility. In friendships, a subtle comparison, who earns more, who has more, may be enough to stir envy that corrodes the bond. In relationships, partners often learn one another's weaknesses, and when anger flares, those weaknesses are pressed like buttons. Even online, in the smallest interactions, provocation rules. A stranger's insult in a comment section may consume your entire day while the stranger walks away amused, having stolen your calm. One digital spark can stir waters so violently that reputations collapse, careers end, even lives are ruined. And yet, while this may sound bleak, the law also offers a gift: awareness. Once you recognize provocation as a weapon, you are no longer helpless against it. The moment you feel anger rising, pride swelling, fear tightening your chest, you can ask yourself, am I being baited? Am I being stirred? That pause alone is enough to begin reclaiming power. The manipulators of the modern world count on you not recognizing the game. They count on you reacting. They count on you thrashing blindly. But if you resist, if you remain calm while others rage, you will see the storm for what it is. A net cast by someone else. And once you see it, you can choose not to swim into it. This is the modern battlefield of Law 39. It is not fought with armies, but with narratives. It is not fought in fields, but in minds. The same principle that toppled Darius and empowered Philip and Napoleon now governs politics, business, and the smallest corners of your daily life. The law has not changed, only the stage has. If the law of provocation is so powerful, then the first question you must ask yourself is not how to use it, but how to survive it. Because long before you stir the waters of others, you must master the storm within yourself. The truth is simple. The easiest person to manipulate is the one who cannot control their own emotions. If you are quick to anger, if you are desperate for recognition, if you cannot endure silence without demanding an answer, then you are vulnerable. Anyone who knows your triggers holds the leash to your actions. The countermove begins with awareness. The moment you feel the waters stirring inside you, the heat in your chest, the quickening of your breath, the flush of pride or anger, you must pause. Even a single pause can break the chain. Ask yourself, am I being baited? Is this reaction mine, or is it what someone else wants from me? That question, simple as it is, places distance between you and the storm. Second, cultivate indifference where possible. Silence, patience, and calm are not weakness. They are armor. When someone hurls an insult and you do not respond, you rob them of their victory. When someone spreads a rumor and you do not panic, you rob them of their leverage. The calm man frustrates the manipulator because nothing is more unnerving to one who seeks a reaction than still waters. Third, train yourself to see provocation as information. When someone tries to stir you, they reveal their own strategy. An insult may uncover envy. A rumor may reveal fear. A sudden outburst may point to insecurity. If you stay calm, you learn more about them than they ever learn about you. And finally, once you have mastered your own calm, you may choose to turn the law outward. To stir others is to make them predictable. A rival who cannot resist bait will always show his weakness. A competitor who cannot remain patient will always move too soon. A friend who lashes out too quickly may reveal secrets they meant to keep. Stirring waters does not always mean aggression. Sometimes it is a subtle question, a pause at the right time, a silence that unsettles. Sometimes it is doing nothing at all, simply watching as pride does the work for you. But let us be clear, this is a dangerous weapon. Used carelessly, it creates enemies who never forgive. Used without control, it can backfire, for the storm you stir in others may one day engulf you. The true master uses provocation sparingly, like poison, not to kill indiscriminately, but to weaken a rival at the exact moment it matters most. And this is the paradox of Law 39. You must learn to live in two states at once. Calm within yourself, storm in the world around you. When others thrash blindly, you stand still, watching. And when the moment comes, you stir the waters just enough, cast the net just wide enough, and reel in exactly what you need. From the battlefields of Gaugamela to the corridors of the Kremlin, from Philip's whispered rumors to Napoleon's feints to Stalin's storms of fear, one truth remains unchanged. The man who can stir the waters while remaining calm himself holds the advantage. Look around you, and you will see that nothing has changed. The waters of human nature are always restless, always waiting for the smallest stone to create ripples. And most people, once stirred, cannot resist thrashing. They reveal themselves in anger. They move too quickly in fear. They destroy themselves in pride. But those who master calm, those who refuse to be baited, stand apart. To watch others rage while you remain still is to see the world with rare clarity. To wait while others exhaust themselves is to inherit opportunities they cannot see. And to stir the waters with precision, to create storms that blind your rivals while you stand untouched. This is power in its purest form. Yet do not mistake this law for something clean or without cost. To live by provocation is to walk a narrow path. Stir too often and you invite resentment that may outlive you. Lose your calm even once and you may undo years of patience. The waters you stir will always carry risk, for storms do not answer to their maker forever. Still, the lesson endures. When others are thrashing, step back. When the storm rages, wait. When someone stirs your waters, let the surface remain still. And when the time is right, cast your net, not with haste, but with certainty. That is how kingdoms fall, how empires rise, how lives are reshaped, not through brute strength, but through provocation and patience. Like the fisherman who waits by the river, you do not need to chase the fish. You need only stir the waters and they will come to you. Like, subscribe, comment, or don't. You are the master of your own life.